Let's get started. Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So who'd like to start chanting the Gita shlokas?
ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन कृतितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीमष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्तदामि भगवद्गीते भवेद्वेक्षिणीम्
नमोऽस्तुते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दाय तपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमय प्रदीपः।
नमोऽस्तुते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दाय तपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः।
वसुदेवसुदं देवं कंसचारूणमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्
सर्वधर्मान् परित्यज्य मामेकं शरणं व्रज अहं त्वा सर्वपापेभ्यः मोक्षयिष्यामि मा शुचः. So welcome everyone. We are on the 12th chapter. We're getting into some really interesting shlokas here with regard to, I meant one more. Yeah, with regard to this aspect of devotion. And we already saw, of course, last week we didn't have a class, but the week before that, we started looking into all the way up to almost 8 shlokas. So in today's, we'll get directly into this question of how do we know we are progressing? I'm leaving it particularly general here right now, but I want to hear from you. We're all, we all love to know how we are developing, how we are evolving, how we are progressing in life and everything. So, how would each one of us take this question? Because in this particular chapter, there's some extremely profound shlokas that are coming up, which really addresses this question, especially towards the later half of today, what we're going to do. So, can I hear from you on how do you think? If every answer is a good answer, but this is what Bhagavad Gita is really, as a manual of life. And if we are truly reading the manual, it gives us the answers on how we can monitor our progress in life. So, what do you think?
Carry on.
Hari Om, Mama.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. All these days we were worshipping Sauna Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have moved one step forward. We feel that we can worship Nirguna Brahman, and because Lord is all over the place, and he is the person who creates, preserves and destroys And he is in each and every one of us. And now we think more of the society, the extended family and their well-being, and that all of us should live happily and progress towards our goal. And our mind is more focused. We could focus our mind and pray. I mean, it's true that sometimes you get disturbed and the mind wanders, but we have the Vairagya or strength to bring it back and focus. You know, even if it wanders a bit here, and because we are not perfect, we are in the process of progressing. So that's how I feel.
Okay. Yeah. Amma, since you are so progressed, and so you've been part of satsangs, you're part of the what should I study groups, and you've been also highly I mean, mature is not the right word here because Amma's elder, and but you have already progressed in that way, so you've already taken it from the level of saguna to nirguna upasanam. And you've also talked about, in some sense, the barrier to our progression, which is what you use as a mind. Thank you so much for that, Amma. But I'm looking at even a little lower levels, from a basic levels. So is
Hari
yoga,
Om.
yes, Meena?
I would say there, I find a lot of difference from day one, which you started this Bhagavad Gita, I think 6 years back, and today
It's
there is
years.
there's
Wow,
a
I didn't
there's
realize
a
it was that long ago.
there's a vast difference from day one until today, to the thing that, as Amma said, the focus of her mind to the God is, I would say, at least 10 to 20, 15 to 20% increase. No wandering or something like that. Of course, as she said, sometimes we get distracted, but the concentration level is way more than it was on day one. That is number one for sure. And number two is, I mean, you just try to, as you always, you keep saying, detached attachment. Don't get attached to so many things, whether it is material or your loved ones or whatever it is. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. And I would say at least I maybe 25-30% I got, if I'm correct. I mean, just leave it, just leave it, just leave it, just keep going, keep going. So that is the main difference as far as I'm concerned, I have experienced. And all thanks to goes to Sunitha ji.
No, no, no. I think it is the Shastras. The Shastras, a Guru Parampara.
But there is somebody,
Guru.
some mediator we need
Yeah.
to teach us all those. I mean, there are a lot of things available to read and all that, but somebody, when somebody tells you over and over and over again and again, it definitely gets into our mind. That's so. Thank you so much. We are truly, truly blessed.
This is all again, all Ishvara's Kripa and our Gurudev, our Guru Parampara, because of which we have an opportunity to progress in life and to be able to listen to Bhagavad Gita. The very fact that we're listening to Bhagavad Gita is the progress that we made in our life, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah.
As you said, I won't say completely matured, but we are getting into closer to little bit of maturity.
Yes, exactly. That's why the word maturity is a good word. It encompasses anywhere from, from where we would say a child is getting matured to we're all being human beings, but even among human beings, how do we grade our level of progress is a level of maturity. Now, having said that, how would we define maturity? How would we define maturity? I just want to get some definitions because they're all related. And especially in the shlokas, you will see all the way from 8 through 11, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's the four shlokas. The way this thought flow has been developed is just amazing. Every day, I take the same Bhagavad Gita, this green book, and I'm reading it. It's a new thought that comes in. And just that itself shows that, our mind is getting more and more pakkuvam, we say in Tamil, right? Which is more and more subtle. Um, the thoughts that go through our mind is so different, so much more elevating, I would say. But how would we define maturity? Because that is the progress we are making. How do we know we are progressing? It is actually increasing in our level of maturity. Well, let me
Hi,
say, yeah, go ahead, please.
sorry, Hariom. Maturity, it's a very relative term. How do we connect, how do we say that I have matured? I think it is I have, like all they've explained, talked about how Gita has helped them change their outlook of we can start with small things and then go from, like Amma was saying, from uh, Saguna Brahman to Nirguna. That is the highest level.
Yes.
But it but going step by step from me to us, it's a relative progress. It is progress, but it is a relative, it's a very small. From micro to macrocosm, the way we we evolve, our thought process evolves. I think it is very subtle, and each person's journey is different from the other person. Each person's journey is different. So I don't think we can compare. We cannot compare my progress with her progress or with someone else's progress. Each person's journey is so different. So it's that is what I think about in maturity is a little. That's my take on maturity. Thank
So
you.
it is not at the individual level that we're talking about maturity. This is maturity is a general word. And so let me just offer a little bit of my thoughts on this one. Um, I will always remember Guruji Swami Tejomayananda, when he was teaching us at Sandipani, and I especially remember the Ishavasya Upanishad that he was teaching, he said, at the end of the day, we have to develop a clarity in our thought process. The clarity in a thought process which allows us to ensure that whatever decision we make, whatever our thought process, how we come across in our own discussions, our conversations, our mode of behavior, our actions, the clarity is so very important that whatever we do, we will not really go wrong, you know. Now, this is not at the individual level. This would be something where anybody who looks at us, will say that, okay, this person definitely is what should I say, is on the right path, or somebody who people start looking up to, or whatever. And I just want to give an example from almost 30 years ago. I remember um, I had just started teaching Balavihar, and I remember at that time we had Sam's Club, and it was probably around 4:30, 5 o'clock or something in the evening. I was just finishing my work, and I happened to, kind of get a little fast into a parking lot. In the parking lot, I was just going to, I kind of swerved in kind of fast. And there was one of the parents of the Balavihar student, he happened to see me. He saw me get out of the car. He said, "Wow, I never thought you would do this. You would drive so fast into this parking lot." So the point is, our actions really show who we are. So as a Balavihar teacher, I was not expected to drive that fast into that parking lot. Somebody was watching, and somebody's so now, if we have a clarity of thought, that automatically transfers into our action, it transfers into our behavior, and in everything, it is not that we are good only for the times when I'm supposed to be good. I'm good all the time. So, to what extent that goodness expands, to what extent that my behavior expands, is how the clarity of thought leads you to those levels. And that, to me personally, has always been the yardstick of progress. You know, how many times do I get angry? How many times am I rude to somebody? How many times am I showing love? So rude is one aspect, but the other end of the yardstick is actually pure love. So, what is devotion? Devotion is nothing but pure love, which we are showing, which, as Usha is also here, when she said about, devotion is something that I look at, which when I go to the temple. So, when I go to the temple, I exhibit that pure love or devotion to that Lord who is there in the form of the idol. But that pure love is also expanded to all the people around me. It doesn't matter whether it's a dog, a stray dog on the street, whether it is a human being in front of me, whoever it is, whether it's my own family, or whether it's my neighbors, or whether it's somebody who I don't talk to much. So that is what I look at as a progress is showing really pure love to anyone and everyone and everybody and everything. And that comes through the clarity of expression that I develop in my mind. And that clarity of expression itself is because of what my study of the Shastras are saying, like Bhagavad Gita. What is it saying? In how I can develop the clarity of thought, which will allow me to see everyone as one, and that oneness being reflected in my behavior itself. So I just want to leave that thought with you. Any comments or any questions on that?
Sunitha
Yes, Jayashri. Can you be a little louder, Jayashri? We can't hear you.
volume to the highest. Can you
Yeah,
hear
now
me
it's better. Now it's better.
So I understand what we are saying and all that, but so to practice oneness or to see oneness in everyone, right?
Yes.
Is it wrong to when we are praying for our family, for our friends, for people we know and the world, but we should stop uh, see everybody as one rather than separate ourselves, right?
Correct.
How
Jayashri, can you repeat your last sentence? We
um,
lost you.
how do we practice that oneness?
How do we practice? So I think it's a two-part question, right? One is it wrong to pray and
For us,
ask for a certain desire for my family or for my friends or even for myself? That's number
correct.
one, right? And the
Yes.
second part is, how do I see oneness?
No.
No.
So how to just remove ourselves and we remove our herdness, hisness to the a higher
Higher goal,
spirit.
higher part of it. Right, right. So the first part of it, Lord Krishna will say that is not wrong at all, Like in chapter 9 or no, chapter 7, I think there were four kinds of bhaktas that we talked about, Artha, Artharthi, Jnani, and
Jignashu, Arthartri, Jignashu, and Jnani.
Jignasu and Jnani. Exactly, exactly. So the first level is Artha. We are praying for wealth, we are praying for material prosperity and everything. So that's nothing wrong. Even he is dear to me. That's what Krishna is saying, you know. But at some point, we come to praying not just for me and my self growth, but I start to, pray for my family, for my friends. So that is the expansion of my own self. I'm now seeing the others around me as part of me. So, in
Oh,
that sense, this myness, MYNESS, that's what I meant. This me is now being diluted
okay.
to diluted by my love for myself alone has now been expanded, or you can say it's been diluted to a larger fold. So
Right.
now I take it to a bigger and a bigger and a bigger circle. So in that sense, that's how I grow. And that's how that even that Artharthi, Jignasu and Jnani, um, um, the progression happens. So that is one part of it. Again, your second part you had mentioned was
Seeing oneness in everybody. So that
seeing
means
oneness. So seeing oneness in everyone, again, this chapters from all the way from 7 to 10, where you start seeing that it is me alone in everything. That's what, chapter 10 literally shows a vibhuti of the Lord. Ishvara is in everyone. I am also part of Ishvara, you know. The Saguna Brahman aspect of the supreme consciousness, it encompasses everyone, not just me. So everything in this world is nothing but me and me alone. That's how Krishna is saying. So if I am part of that bigger picture, then how can I even hate anybody? How can I dislike anybody? That's also one very beautiful shloka coming up. I think it's 13. Adveshta Sarva Bhutanam Maitra Karuna Evacha, chapter 12. It'll be coming up. So in that sense too, it is very critical for very, very, we start to see the oneness. And ultimately in chapter 11, of course, that, Arjuna himself sees um,
Ishwari.
in Krishna. He sees him. He sees himself in Krishna. He sees himself fighting the battle. You know. So you see all this. That chapter 10, 11, it exposes ourselves to recognize that I am part of the one. Now, of course, the question arises is if that is the case, why am I not experiencing it in real life, right? Why is it when I go to my work or whatever and I see my boss or somebody, whom I'm forced to work with, how can I see that he and I are one? We actually, it's amazing. It starts from the Panchakosha level, right? It starts from the Annamaya Kosha itself. I first, I see somebody who's of a different color. Psychologically, my mind starts to judge and everything. And then it goes to my Manomaya Kosha and, Vijnanamaya Kosha, where I start making judgments, whereas my mind starts to reject. So all this requires an understanding first. So
Oh,
we start to do a lot of the higher level practices, which again in our shloka number 12, it will come up, where he talks about again the progression of knowledge and meditation and renunciation. What is the progression? So this, and I'm sorry we took so much amount of time in our discussion, but I wanted to emphasize that chapter 12 is all about progression. How are we
thank,
progressing? What are the values?
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll move on here. So these were the shlokas which we already did, and then it was in shloka 5 where up to the shloka number 3 and 4 was about, as Amma was also saying beautifully, it's the progression from Saguna to Nirguna worship. But Krishna always, he believes in starting off from the highest level. So he takes the Nirguna Upasaka first. And then he says in shloka number 5 how it is so very difficult for somebody to, you know, to pray to that Nirguna Brahman. He says it's very hard for the embodied to reach. And the key word here is embodied. Embodied means somebody who is not, it is not somebody who has a body. Okay. I'm sure if you look up the dictionaries, they will say embodied means somebody who has a physical body. So does that mean that anybody with a physical body cannot pray to a Nirguna Brahman? Is that what the shloka is saying? So again, in this book, beautifully, Gurudev actually, Swami Chimananda points out to Shankaracharya's works, Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya, and he says about how, embodied people are those people who are attached to the physical bodies. They are attached to what they say. They're attached to how they think. That's who an embodied person is. So it doesn't mean that, I have to, only when I give up the body, that I will have an opportunity to pray to that Nirguna Brahman. But he says, being in this physical body and not being attached to this physical body, only then you can actually think about Nirguna Brahman. So that is, but our minds, he says, avyakta asakta chetasam. If the mind is just unable to focus on the unmanifest, mainly because mind itself is part of the manifest. So how can one pray to something which is completely unmanifest with unmanifest, which is infinitude? And that infinitude you can never ever get to with a finite. A mind is a finite thing. So that is why he says it's very, very difficult, and that's why in Kathopanishad we talked about last time how it is like a razor's edge, kshurasya dhara, nishita duratyaya. So it's very, very hard. And again, it is in Atma Bodh, which is one of the earlier texts, Shankaracharya clearly says that this mind itself is actually working in the realm of an illusory world. Okay. It's an illusory world, and it is kind of, he calls this avidya. Avidya, which is the opposite of knowledge, is like darkness. Okay. Now, darkness can go only by light. Okay. When there is vidya. When there is vidya, avidya is not there at all. And this is, of course, when we talk about vidya, it has to be pure knowledge. So ignorance can go only by knowledge. But we are living in an ignorant world. What do we mean by that? Basically, for us, we take everything very, very seriously in this world. Whatever which is, whatever I am, again, this is a concept that we have to seriously think through, being in this physical body, having this mind and having this intellect, and understanding that everything is temporary. Okay, that is one level of an understanding. So everything that we see in front of us, all the physical things, whether it's a table, chair, pen, a phone, all these, including our human bodies, right? Physical bodies, all this is temporary. Now we get very attached to all this, and we take on certain roles in order to interact with all this. Then we start to take all these things very seriously, right? Now, all that we're doing in the transactional world, however, we get attached to those things. And that's what ignorance is all about. Ignorance is the attachment to some things which at one level is temporary, but at a higher level is actually an illusion. And this illusion, we will come in the third section of Bhagavad Gita, we'll be talking a lot about this, so I will not dwell too much on this at this point. But we are getting attached to things which we should not be, and that is the ignorance which need to be taken out by the knowledge itself. And that is what in Atma Bodh is saying, aviroditya karma na vidyam. And any amount of karmas, that is the other thing. It's a very powerful shloka. I only wanted to bring this relevance here is about the vidya and avidya and how um, that need to be thought through very carefully. And any amount, and this is to Jayshree's point, which is the aspect of oneness is actually, if we understand that through, it can happen only through knowledge. Any amount of karmas, that's what the shloka is all about. Any amount of karmas, any amount of my service, my social service that I do, will not remove it unless I have a clear understanding of the knowledge about my oneness. Then all the karmas will help me to accelerate in my journey towards moksha. Okay, but without that, any amount of karmas will not remove the ignorance. That's what this is saying. Okay, so this is what I meant by saying that ultimately knowledge gives us the ability to develop a very sharp intellect. And this sharp intellect actually helps us in, suppressing the mind, because the role of the mind many times is to, sometimes it pulls us down, but the intellect helps us to constantly work on the mind and to bring this knowledge forward and allows us to develop this clarity of mind. And in the Green Book, Swami Chimananda gives a beautiful example about how, an old man um, whose vision is lost and whose hands are shaking can never be able to thread a needle. Just like how, my mind and intellect, if it is always working in this world of temporariness and of illusion, if in this world, actually, what is it that we are creating? It's only basically a play of my desires. And because of my desires, I'm working so much in this world. And I think that is going to give me the happiness. Now, this is another ignorant view of what true happiness means. And because of all this, our meditation on the highest is compromised. As a human being, and as somebody who, for all of us who have this ability to be able to be exposed to this greatness of knowledge, if I'm spending my time pursuing this temporary world objects for my pleasure, thinking that that is what is giving me pleasure, that will not let me grow this one. And that is how this old man, his vision is lost and his hands are shaking and he doesn't have a sharp intellect, right? So that is basically, but we want to develop the sharpness of intellect. We want to develop the clarity of thought through the knowledge, which will allow me to see the oneness. And that is why it is actually called Rajavidya Rajaguhyam, Pavitramidam Uttamam, Pratyaksha Savagamam Dharmyam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. If I understand this knowledge, I will be able to immediately see oneness, and through the oneness, I'll be able to act in this world. So, as we all know, the great grandfather of my final behavior, of how I come across in this world, the great grandfather is the thought which is in my mind. The thought leads to a desire, the desire leads to finally that I have to do a thought that I need to get something, and that thought then gets translated into an action, right? So if I clean up my thoughts, my actions will already be good, you know. So that's why this knowledge helps in clarifying my mind and my intellect and giving me that knowledge about the oneness. And once I have that knowledge, my action in the world is pure. So that's why he says klesha, this it is very hard to um, focus on Nirguna Brahman. So in Shloka 6 onwards, now you will see that how Lord Krishna comes down one step for all of us, where he recognizes that we need a form of the Lord. And by form of the Lord, he's not just talking about the Ekarupa Ishvara, that is the form of the Lord in the form of Ganesha or Krishna or Bhagavati and Shiva, Rama. Not just that aspect of Ishvara, but the aspect of Ishvara which is in front of us, in front of our, and as part of our families, as part of our neighbors, all of them. So with that Ishvara, he says, how do I act in this world? So he emphasizes that we need to have some qualifications, and he starts to give us the step-by-step approach. So in shloka number 6, which we actually saw also last time, and 6 and 7 kind of go together. Here he says, Yet tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha ananyenaiva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate. Then tesha maham samudharta mrityu samsara sagarat bhavami nachirat partha maye veshita chetasam. So again, these shlokas are definitely shlokas where he is now bringing this saguna aspect. So that aspect of him with form everywhere. So, he says, Mai, to me, Mam, me, I, and, to me, and then Aham, I. So they all start to say that, you start to, so he starts again at the highest level. He says, anything and everything you do in this world from now on. Okay, that is the, again, it's not from bottoms up. He's coming from top down approach. So at maybe next week we will have a ladder, and we'll talk about where are we in that ladder or something. But he says from now on, whatever actions you do, whatever anything, just completely renounce, do it as if you're doing it for me and looking at me as a supreme goal. Okay. Yetu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha. So I am the only one who is everywhere. Do that. See me in everyone. Think that I am there in everyone. And anything and everything you do, just say that I'm doing it for you, oh Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, everywhere. I'm only doing it for you. Ananye naiva yogena, with single-minded devotion, completely, my mind is only on you. I'm only on you, and I'm just doing whatever action, thinking I'm doing it for you. Mam dhyayanta upasate, meditating upon me. Everywhere, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Sharda Mami used to say this about how, Swami Chinmayananda, whenever he was not giving a lecture or not speaking to anyone, he always had the Japamala, and always his mind would go on, just doing Japam on the mala, And that's even Eknath Ishwaran, in his 8-point meditation, he talks about how this aspect of having the japa, and of course in chapter, what is that? Japa, how the japa worship is considered to be the highest form, of worship. If I can't even go to the temple, if I can't do this one, if I can only do japam, that itself is the highest. So that's why he says, Mam dhyayanto upasase, meditate upon me, worship me. And then he talks about Tesham Aham Samudharta Mrityu Samsara Sagrat. See, he calls our samsar, the life that we are leading, that doesn't mean that we should not, get married, all that. In fact, Grahastha ashram is considered to be the most important of all the 4 ashrams, because it is the only ashram where we are allowed to earn money. We're allowed to earn money to support the other ashramas, brahmacharis, they're not earning yet. And then vanaprastha, they're already, going towards sannyas. You're supposed to start giving up things, So from the ocean of samsar, so mrityu samsara sagarat, this whole world is, bhavasagar. It's nothing but birth and death happening. So he says, the second you understand about oneness and you start seeing me everywhere, in once, not even a second, he says, I will be there for you. So that's, and so he says, looking at this, I'm just going a little more into detail about this. So he says, just dedicate all your actions at my feet. So, as I said, it's again the highest level. He says, dedicate those actions. And by this, in many ways, uh, you can see the connections to chapter 3, for example, where if in nature, okay, chapter 3 is actually, there's a lot of sustainability values. I'm sure many of the MBA students and, corporate can learn a lot from chapter 3 about Devan Bhavayata and Parasparam Bhavayantaha, that, that shlokas and everything, where how in nature everything works together. So, if that is the case, why can we also not do the same thing? Why can I not? Why do I think that I'm the one who's doing it for myself? You know? So, Etu Sarvani Karmani, my Sanya said, so just give up any kind of attachment to it. You're not doing it for myself, we are not doing it for ourselves, but we are doing it for the Lord who is in front of me, in front of everyone, in the form of the different people, right? So those who worship me, renouncing all their actions, um, it allows us to progress. So our progress now is I'm giving up um, my own kosha, who I am, what is my role. I'm not being attached to it, but I'm trying to this. We see this even in simple examples. Like for example, I remember when I was working for the chemical company, big chemical company, BASF. At that time, I would feel so kind of loyal to the company, when I was going for sales, accompanying my salespeople and all that, say, oh, we do this. And the tagline for BSF is, we don't make the things you buy, we make them better. And, you kind of get so much into that fact that you're BASF and you want to do this and you are great, that thing. So we never attach ourselves to me at that point. It's not like, I did this for BSF. No, BSF is selling this product. So that way we start to do this. So matparaha ananye neva yogena, with single-minded devotion. I try to do this. I regard, as a supreme goal. And in the Green Book, there's a beautiful example he gives about how, and Swami Chimanand also gives this one other example. But this example that is given in the book is about how a dancer never forgets the mridangam, the mridangam tala is constantly going on. Her steps are always in line with the talam. She never forgets that aspect of it. So too, for all of us, whenever we are doing our actions has to be in rhythm with everything in the universe. I cannot afford to litter. I cannot afford to take more than what I should. You know, um, sometimes we tend to stock up so much in our things, thinking that, what if tomorrow Myers gets shut down or something? Will I have milk? Will I have this? If I truly have my faith in Ishvara, he will take care of it. Even recently when we had the war situation, right, with Pakistan, there was some amount of uncertainty, what is going to happen. We were getting messages that tomorrow the light, everything, there's going to be no electricity between a certain time. The entire country, there were pockets which were going to be in this. So there was that uncertainty, what's going to happen? But if I truly have that love for somebody, that automatically brings that energy down, or that improves the energy of the ecosystem. This is, I'm saying, at a practical level, when I take some of these shlokas, that's how I understand this aspect of it, and how we can practice of seeing Ishvara everywhere. To that extent, where I have that faith, you know what, we will survive, we will go ahead, this is only for one day it's happening or something. To that extent, we are progressing in our level of understanding who we are, our relation to the whole world itself, you know. And it says ananye naiva yoga, ananye naiva yogena. So that is unswerving yoga with absolutely no, and again in the book, it's so beautiful the way he describes what yoga is, He says yoga uh, is the ability to really think about the highest and having that connection directly, with that mental attunement, he calls it, to the higher ideal. That state of perfection is what yoga is. So our minds are constantly, at the lower level. We are just swimming in the lower level. We are not thinking about the highest, you know. So that faculty, we have that faculty of yoga, he says. He says we all have that with us, where we can actually yoke ourselves always to that Ishvara and seeing that Ishvara in everyone. But we allow our mind to wander through so many different things. Our goals keep changing, and but Ananya Yoga is where I have that as a goal and then do all my actions. We do all the actions, and then sometimes we think about the highest goal, which is Ishvara, right? So that is why he says the mindset in me, to those matparaha, and by doing that, I'll be able to reach that part. So that is, now he has described about Saguna Brahman, and then he has talked about how I can see that Lord in everyone, so that is the aspect. But then the question may arise, I'm here, I have just started studying all the Bhagavad Gita, and I really cannot meditate upon that highest all the time. So what do I do? So that is where shloka number 7, he starts to, he comes down and he says, ye tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha. Oh, sorry, 6 and 7 went together. So we already talked about this, and so I'll kind of skip this. We said about how he'll come, so quickly, right? So let's go to chapter, shloka number 8. So shloka number 8 is, now, he says, Mayeva mana adhatsva, mai buddhim niveshaya, nivasishyasi mayeva, atha urdvam na samshaya. So by fixing your mind, okay, now what can really be our barrier in fixing our mind? In many ways, sometimes it is this intellect, which says, yeah, you're saying that, I have to fix my mind, I have to yoke my mind, ananyena yogena, all this, you're saying that, you should be doing this. But guess what? I have this doubt. I don't think this is too practical, We may think like that, right? But that is why the shloka is saying that, well, it's not just your mind, but you got to convince your intellect also, okay? Because there's no way that only our mind can work, our head, the mind is actually controls our emotions, right? So emotionally, I may, uh, in fact, mind is the one which, if the intellect is strong and convinced, the mind will automatically follow. So here he's saying, again, this is the extension of the shloka number 7. So he says, fix your mind on me, and then also your intellect. Your intellect has to be convinced. And this is why when Jayashree said the oneness doesn't come easily, it really, really needs that understanding of our Shastras. And once that understanding is there, and my mind has been slowly and slowly brought through concentration and the japa and everything, then at that point, if my mind is also convinced, only then actually we can enter into things like meditation. In our Sandipani course, our Acharya basically said, uh, we will not start meditation. Many people thought, oh, the very first day we're going to be sitting for meditation for an hour and all that. It took almost more than a year before he started what meditation is. And that is because of this understanding which we need to develop in our intellect about oneness. And only then can the mind be controlled. And so that is why he says, if you have a doubt, forget about it. You have both the mind and the intellect has to be on that high goal. So fix your mind on me, and that's why I put this alone, nothing else. Okay, for fixing your mind. So you've got the mind itself has to take the shape of Ishvara, and place your mind on me. Fix your mind on me. Place your mind only on me, he says. You know, at any point, what happens is what is happening in a mind is so many different things. Bringing that focus on that Ishvara and having that focus completely resting, keeping my mind on that Ishvara, he says. So now, if that is also, so that second shloka number 8 was kind of a technique on how 6 and 7 was explained, right? So this was a technique. So now Krishna is, saying that, okay, if you're not able to do this much, okay, I've tried to convince you, we've explained about, the oneness in Shloka, in the earlier chapters. If you cannot do it, so then he comes in Shloka number 9 and he says, I'll tell you something, and he says, of course, it's not that I've not told you this before, but I'm reminding you this again here. Can somebody guess where he had talked a little bit about this one technique where he says, so I'll tell you what the shloka is about, and then maybe you might be reminded about it. So he says, if your if your intellect is not strong enough and your mind is still wandering and it is not able to really um, connect to the oneness which you're seeing around in the form of Ishvara in different forms, athachittam samadhatum, na shaknoshi mai sthiram, steady. It's again, if I tell you the thing, it's like, this oil, when it drops, there is absolutely no breaks, right? Because of the high viscosity. See, there's some chemistry, there's this high viscosity of the oil. When it is dropping, it doesn't break at all, correct? So that's how he's saying, if your mind is not that steady to fix, then by this technique of Abhyasa Yoga, Mam Ichhaptum Dhananjay, he said, by the yoga of constant practice. Abhyasa means, studying on a regular, consistent basis, consistently doing that. So, yoga of constant practice, then you'll be able to reach me. So this yoga of constant practice, Abhyasa Yoga, does anybody remember which chapter we had seen this?
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6, exactly. So, when I gave this example of the oil also, it is chapter 6, So in that chapter, first, of course, he talks about a lot on the external surroundings. Um, how I should sit, and everything. But then after that, he starts to talk about this Abhyasa Yoga. The Abhyasa Yoga is about taking the mind and fixing it to uh, the object of my adoration. Okay. And as I'm doing it, my mind might wander. For the first 2 or 3 seconds, I'm able to place my mind on, I have the idol in front of me, and I have this beautiful Lord Krishna playing the flute, and I'm thinking about what shantam there is on that face and everything. And after 2 or 3 seconds, my mind starts wandering about my flute, and oh my God, I haven't touched my flute. And then I feel bad about, so you see how the mind starts to wander, right? And then, but if I start to bring my mind back, I say, no, 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 I've come here for meditation. I start to this. I can bring back my mind again to that Lord, you know. So every time the mind wanders, I bring it back. I keep bringing it back. So that's what he talks about as the yoga of practice, or Abhyasa Yoga. Um, so he says, Abhyasa Yogena Tataha. By the constant practice, and that he calls it also as yoga. Again, yoga meaning that where I'm doing it for a higher goal. So this, I'll be able to bring it. So you see, he starts to talk about how my mind is to be focused on the goal all the time. Then in shloka number 9, he's talking about if that is not possible, um, okay, you're allowed to get your mind wandering sometimes, but don't go too much. Keep bringing it to doing your action only with that highest goal of Ishvara. Now, so we are all this, if you can think about it, it is at the thought level, right? Now he goes to, and he says, if you're not able to do even this Abhyasa Yoga, why are we not able to do this Abhyasa Yoga? Obviously, because there are much bigger priorities in our mind. We have good intentions of um, doing these actions in the world by focusing on the fact that it's only Ishvara in different forms, but we are not able to do it. So then what do I do? So in Shloka 10, he says, Abhyasepya samarthosi mat karma paramo bhava madartam api karmani kurvan siddhima vapsyasi. So if my mind is just not focusing, I'm trying even up to, the best possible scenario is where I sit for at least 10 minutes of meditation and my mind wandered only 10 times or whatever, I was able to bring it back. Or maybe to the worst possible scenario where for 10 minutes I was sitting down, hardly 3 or 4 seconds, I was able to really focus on that Lord Krishna. Then what do I do? So now we come to that. If you remember when we talked about this evolution, where we say thought, then thought plus desire, then the desire comes to the level of action, correct? If I'm a very action oriented person, okay, I'm not able to sit, I'm not even able to practice this, then let's focus on our actions. Okay, how am I acting in this world? Where are all the situations where I act? Well, we act basically, whether it's in the family, in a house, in our community, at work, or sometimes for myself, right? So those are the areas in which we are doing many actions, and all these actions are, of course, um, action is the final outcome of there's some desire within us. Some of them are, of course, nitya karmas, naimitya karmas, then so many different, if we start talking about the type of karmas, but many of them are basically guided by our desires. So here he says, abhyase pya samarthosi, asamarthosi, if you are unable to practice this abhyasa yoga, then also be intent on performing actions for my sake. So now say that if at the thought level, so the previous ones, as I said, were at the thought level, where he says, fix your mind on me, place your mind on me, all that is at the thought level. But now he says, actions. Think that you're performing actions. So blindly, don't even, even here, there may be one or two levels, Gita says, shloka number 1210 says, just do actions for my sake. Or even like karmani vadikaraste, ma phaleshu kadachana. All this, just think that you're doing it for me. Okay? So madartam api karmani. If for my sake even actions are done by you, you shall attain perfection. So he says, come down to that level where actions are being done for the sake of the Lord. Okay, you shall attain perfection. Mat karma param. So it is at the level of the karta, at the level of myself. Okay, I'm doing the action, but I'm doing the action for somebody who I have full faith is none other than Ishvara in that form. Okay, so my ego is still intact. Okay, my ego is intact, but I'm doing it for this. So, but it is at the karta level. That is the aspect he's coming to. And then moving on to shloka number 11. I know. Okay, we have 6 minutes over. So in shloka number 11, now he says, even if you're not able to be at that point, where you're not able to recognize the Lord in people, let me take you to one more level down at the level of the action, where you can actually renounce the fruit of that action. Okay, no longer are you thinking, you're not worried about what you get out of your action itself. So the previous one was focusing on the karta aspect. Now we are thinking about the bhoktritva. Bhoktritva meaning the aspect of me which is expecting something out of an action. So give up that bhoktritva is what he's trying to say here. Athai tadapya shaktosi kartum madhyogam. So if you're not able to do the way the previous shloka is talking about, then he says, taking refuge in me. You still think of me, but give up the fruit of the action. So for example, if I'm working on a project at work, or I'm doing something for my family, I just focus upon the action. I completely put my attention on the action, but I completely give up as to how the outcome is going to be. And next week these shlokas are kind of more close to what we can grapple with or understand, because we're doing actions all day, right? So we will talk a little more next week on this logic of action. Well, very important to understand that, about really What is action? When do we see the result? Does it happen in the present, in the future? So he says, Sarva karma phalatyagam. Just give up the fruits of action. Tatha kuru yatatmavan. So do it with renunciation of this one, and your mind completely under your control. Not allowing the mind to think about, okay, what will I get out of this? Why should I do this? All these questions. Just give up all that. Just focus on the action part of it. Okay. So next week we'll just kind of start the talk with just the progression part of it a little bit, and move on to 12 and 13, which you come to a very different aspect of what chapter 12 is all about. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukha bhag bhavet. Om
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamid Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamada Purnamevasishyate.
Om
Om
Shanti Shanti
Shanti
Shanti.
Shanti.
Om
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Let me